Coming up on We Talk News this week, another Republican-led cannabis reform bill gets introduced in the U.S. House. This one is focused on rescheduling. Plus, California gets closer to developing their own interstate commerce market and the rules that govern them. And Pfizer is bullish on weed after acquiring Arena Pharmaceuticals for $6.7 billion. So, is Big Pharma positioning for an industry change? Plus, Washington, D.C. becomes a legal adult use market despite its federal illegal classification. And a new study by a medical respiratory publication concludes that there is little to no harm to your lungs if you smoke weed. Fire up that bong! We Talk News with Elena Pinto is next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elena Pinto, and welcome to this week's Weed Talk News. There may be more movement on Capitol Hill when it comes to cannabis reform, yet again, at the hands of the GOP. In recent days, Florida Representative Greg Steube introduced the Marijuana 1-3 Act for the third session in a row. The bill would task U.S. Attorney General with moving cannabis from a Schedule I substance to a Schedule III within 60 days of the bill's enactment. Removing cannabis from its Schedule I status under federal law is something President Joe Biden has already called for, but hasn't yet happened. And while some think cannabis should be pulled from the Controlled Substances Act altogether, the congressman debates that rescheduling it instead could be an interim move to promote more in-depth research into the plant. Meanwhile, down the street in D.C. this week, the mayor there signed the Medical Cannabis Amendment Act, a bill that, in essence, sets up D.C.'s own adult use market. The legislation would eliminate caps on cannabis licensing, give business operators tax relief, prioritize equity businesses, and even allow on-site consumption facilities. The bill also codifies that people can self-certify as medical cannabis patients without needing a doctor's recommendation. However, MJ Biz Daily reports that under Washington, D.C.'s Home Rule Act legislation passed by the mayor and city council goes to Congress for a 30-day review, meaning the Democrat-controlled Senate and Republican-controlled House have until early March to potentially squander the plans. And by the way, where do things stand with banking? Well, Jill Goldsberry has the answer. She kicks off our state-to-state roundup with the New Jersey Report.
Good afternoon. I'm Jill Goldsberry, your We Talk News New Jersey correspondent. And here's what's happening in cannabis news this week. As you may already have noticed, lots of dispensaries are opening up in our state. The problem is we're facing a little bit of a cannabis crisis. They have nowhere to bank. So advocates and stakeholders remain frustrated with Congress because they were unable to pass the recent marijuana banking bill as of the last session and the latest reforms that they wanted to bring along with it. But now they're looking at how this can be achievable with the current 118th Congress now that the Democrats are no longer in the House. So we have our own Senator, Cory Booker, who initially supported blocking the Safe and Fair Enforcement Banking Act. But now he's done a little bit of a turnaround and he's looking at a compromise to get the bill passed and get something done. He remains committed to incorporating equity into legislation and plans to work this session to get this done, but the task obviously will be steeper. So our neighboring senator, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, has really taken up with the Republicans to kind of fault them for their lack of persistence in getting this package on the floor, particularly the Safe Plus package. And now that we currently do not have a clear policy position from President Biden's office, as far as we know, his stance is that states should be able to create their own cannabis laws without without federal intervention. And we will stay on top of the story to see what happens with that. And in other cannabis news, but going back to that, as it stands, we may not have banking in New Jersey for cannabis entrepreneurs for a few years. So that's where that lands. However, in other news, women in cannabis are being honored. They were being honored this week at Attain Health. The Just Us Foundation has teamed up with Attain to honor women in cannabis. Most recently, Cheryl Murray Powell of the Just Us Foundation sat down with Mary Lynn Mather, who is she's a legacy canna nurse from Patients Out of Time, which is an organization I urge you to take a look at. Patientsoutaftime.com. They're an advocacy foundation for patients in need of cannabis, medical cannabis. So take a look at that. Mary Lynn Mathers was honored this week. She is one of the advocates of cannabis for patients since the 70s, and she was able to talk about all of the progress that they were making in the 80s and 90s with cannabis and how those programs were shut down by the government. So definitely take a look at Patients Out of Time and see if that's something you'd like to donate to keep the fight going. In other news this weekend, if you're interested in getting to know how the business works, find out about expungement and all of that, you can take a little trip on down to Brooklyn to a workshop called the Take Action Workshop being produced by cannaware.org this Saturday from 1 to 5 p.m. at 57 Graham Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. You can go to cannaware.org for more information on that. My name is Jill. I am your New Jersey correspondent for We Talk News. Thanks so much for listening and have a great evening.
Cannabis cultivators in the state of Vermont want a new name. Growers in the Green State are urging regulators to designate cannabis cultivation as agriculture, which would give them significant tax breaks and potentially allow them to break into the budding legal market. Jessie Lynn Dolan has more from Vermont this week.
Jessie Lynn Dolan from Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the We Talk News Vermont Report. The Agency of Administration released the year-end tax data for Vermont's cannabis retail sales, which has surpassed $6 million in 2022. The Vermont Cannabis Control Board's first meeting of 2023 was on January 30th, where they approved 23 new adult use licenses, including 9 cultivators, 9 manufacturers, and 5 retailers. At the January 30th meeting, the board reviewed their 36-page report on social equity intended for legislators to share market data on the participation of social equity and economic empowerment licensees. On Friday, February 3rd, Vermont Growers Association hosted an industry affairs call to discuss 2023 rulemaking priorities, reforms, and anticipated cannabis bills for legislation. Visit vermontgrowers.org for more info. Also on February 3rd, the Green Mountain Patients Alliance held their first of a monthly online support group for patients and caregivers. For more information on that, visit greenmountainpatients.org. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Cannatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at cannatrolls.com.
Is Big Pharma betting on the budding weed industry? You might say so if you look at Pfizer's newest move. Forbes reports the pharmaceutical and biotechnology company recently signed an agreement to acquire Arena Pharmaceuticals to the tune of $6.7 billion. Arena Pharmaceuticals is a biotech company with a pipeline dedicated to cannabinoid-type therapeutics. And with its acquisition, Pfizer is promising cannabinoid-based bowel disease treatment. Quite a different market than creating a vaccine for a global pandemic, but we'll take it. And this move is sure to impact shareholders. So let's get the latest cannabis stock holdings from High on Wall Street's Doug Miller.
Hello, everyone. I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's cannabis stock report for Weed Talk News. I just want to go over the major cannabis stocks since we're starting the month of February and things look like they're going to get popping. So let's just go over some. Aurora Cannabis, stock ticker ACB. It's been moving up and it should continue. Curaleaf, stock ticker CURLF. Remember, they dropped huge news last week. I said it was going to bounce off the bottom. It bounced off the bottom. Tilray, stock ticker TLRY. It's been creeping up and it's ready to go. Hexo, stock ticker HEXO. Remember, they recently had that reverse split and it was moving on up. I'm not going to chase that one. It could continue to go, but I'm just going to watch it. And the ETF Weed, stock ticker WEED. It did pull back some, but I'll tell you what, it looks like it's ready to get smoking. And I am definitely keeping my eye on that one because it's ready to roll. And that's this week's cannabis stock report. Reporting for Weed Talk News, I'm Doug Miller.
Did you ever think we'd see the day that cannabis would be considered the same as regular everyday gardening? Well, we may not be there in all aspects just yet, but it seems everyone, even the mainstream world, benefits from weed. Deborah Borchardt has this week's Green Market Report and one company's earnings that may or may not be under the influence.
This is the business update for Weed Talk News from the Green Market Report. Earnings season is just beginning and it kicks off with Scott's Miracle-Gro, whose hydroponic brand Hawthorne saw its sales drop by 30%. Sales are forecast to continue falling by another 20 to 25%. CEO Jim Hagedorn described the cannabis market as a bloodbath, and he said that the New York market had tripped over itself. Still, he insisted there was progress in the company's investment into Riv Capital and New York cannabis operator Attain, even though shareholders are suing Riv for that acquisition. Overall, the company reported total sales fell by 7% to $526 million, which beat expectations. High Tide saw both its revenues and losses balloon in the final fiscal quarter of 2022. Revenues shot up by 97% to 356 million Canadian dollars. But for the whole year, the company posted a $70 million loss. LeafLink raised $100 million in Series D financing this week. The company also moved co-founders Ryan Smith and Zach Silverman to new roles. Smith is moving from CEO to executive chairman, and Silverman is moving from chief technology officer to senior advisor. And the original cannabis tech company, Akerna, is done. The cannabis assets were sold to Posabit, and what was left was merged with the Bitcoin company called Griffin Mining. This has been your business update from the Green Market Report. I'm Deborah Borchardt for Weed Talk News.
Here's something to roar about. Former Lions star Calvin Johnson is breaking into the weed business. A company he co-owns is planning to launch a line of products right in the Lions' home state. Michigan Normal Executive Director Rick Thompson has the details.
Hello again, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. We've been telling you about robberies in the regulated cannabis marketplace on Weed Talk News for quite some time, but this weekend's tally in one single city might be the worst news yet. WZZM Channel 13 reports that as many as 7 cannabis retailers were robbed this weekend in Muskegon alone. One retailer, Sticky Muskegon, was robbed twice. Thieves pried open the door on Sunday morning and got inside. Then the Sticky people fixed the door, and at 3 a.m. Monday morning, thieves broke in through a window. In both instances, Sticky spokespersons told the TV station that the Rippers targeted the same stuff, prepackaged eighths from cannabis company Local Grove, which normally retail for $50 each. The total taken in both crimes at Sticky was about $24,000, which is about 500 eighths at $50 each. You can view the video of one break-in at Sticky on the WZZM website. You may recall the Cannabis Regulatory Agency issued a warning in January regarding cannabis delivery drivers being ripped off of their cash, cannabis, and sometimes even their cars. And let's hope law enforcement is able to put a stop to these crimes. The state of Michigan issued more than 10,000 pre-employment drug screens last year, according to a new Free Press article. And the number of people being rejected for employment consideration due to cannabis use is rising rapidly. Now, we all know many people don't even try to get a government job if they use cannabis, even medicinally, because of the across-the-board testing policy. But some people do try. In 2018, 49 people failed their drug tests due to cannabis. In 2021, that number had grown to 71 rejected employees, and last year, it more than doubled to 151. Now, these are people who received offers of employment from the government, but were later rejected due to their failed tests. And it doesn't have to be that way, according to the Free Press article. Experts claim only about 8,800 jobs in state government meet the federal requirement for testing of cannabis, jobs like truck driver and prison guard. But the state tests for cannabis in all of their 48,000 civil service jobs. Government representatives say they have to test everyone, according to a 1998 Civil Service Act law, and they have not been presented with any proposal to change that law yet. Oh, and there's big trouble for former Speaker of the House Rick Johnson, who was also chairman of the Medical Marijuana Licensing Board. That board was created by the legislature and served to screen out people with poor moral character or a hidden criminal background and prevent them from obtaining licenses to operate medical marijuana businesses. Some of the people they screened out, but who were later given licenses, include NFL great Calvin Johnson and many of the most successful cannabis entrepreneurs we now have statewide. Johnson is the subject of an FBI probe into the way influence was peddled in the early years of the medical marijuana business licensing program, which was passed by the legislature in 2016. I was interviewed several times regarding this long-awaited turn of events, and I'm quoted in that article as well. Johnson is accused of advancing certain applications to the front of the line at the request of his lobbying friends, and that he failed to properly account for benefits and monies received. The period of time being investigated stretches out earlier than his appointment to the licensing board. Now, there have been grand jury hearings, subpoenas for records, and the government has seized Johnson and his wife's electronic devices. Now that Michigan's legislative houses are both Democratic and the Attorney General seems motivated to root out the corruption in the state capitol, we may see more investigations of this nature launched into how some people received preferential treatment in cannabis licensing from governmental agencies. This is an evolving story. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
Overseas, more countries are considering legalization, and Lex Pelger has all the details in this week's Europe Report.
I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations with the European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Today's news comes from two old hemp countries. In Italy, Ellie Schlein, a leader of the Democratic Party, advocated for the legalization of cannabis. But this caused dissension not only with her own party, but a lot of pushback from the right. Now there are memes going around the internet with pot leaves on her head. So Italy is moving forward, but not very quickly. Then, here in France, the Economic, Social, and Environmental Council proposed a legalized framework for cannabis. They did this for reasons of public health, as well as for drying up the illegal market. However, Macron has been wishy-washy on the issue. 5 years ago, when he was Minister of Economics, he said it was worth considering. But last year, he said he's against it. Also here in France, they did testing of hemp samples. Half of the samples came out high above the legal limit for THC, and a quarter of them had almost undetectable levels of CBD. So the quality issues that are plaguing the US market seem to be happening here in Europe as well. That's the European Cannabis Report for this week. For more on the science side, see my newsletter on Substack, Cannabinoids and the People. I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations for Weed Talk News.
Let's get more international news now with Debbie Facey in Canada.
Hi, this is Debbie Facey from Weed Talk News, your Canadian correspondent with this week's Canadian Toke. This week we'll be having Canada is two articles from StatsCan. And StatCan had a readjustment when it came to the edibles and the complaints that have been coming in when it comes to the higher concentration level. In Canada, as you or may not know, is 10 milligrams per gram. In that case, most products, especially when it comes to edibles, is a 10 milligram max, which means either you see a bar which equals out to 10 milligrams or you'll see maybe 2 gummies. With that being said, what some companies had done, which was create edibles with concentrates, which made them a higher dose in the THC milligram component. With that being said, that has now made StatCan a bit weary when it comes to now putting a cap on the edibles and what they are allowed to be made out of. And for those consumers who are now used to the THC potency, going to be going to the illicit market in order to gain that medication or that recreational product in order to obtain the same THC levels that Canada did allow and have on the market for over a year. Also coming in from StatCan is the kickback notion. With some companies, and if you are not aware, kickbacks are basically almost like a commission. It's pushing a brand over the next in order for them to obtain more shelf space and or popularity. In this case, it's shelf space. What most of these LPs would like to be doing is being able to create kickbacks for these companies in order to gain back money after having an abundance of shelf space available for their products. What that means, most of the smaller brands and the smaller shops aren't able to actually participate in these kickbacks due to the fact that they don't have the inventory space, the quantity, or the LPs don't have the abundance to be able to actually provide a kickback for these stores. What that has caused is a no kickback campaign. And that has now come into light when it comes to many of these LPs and their aggression when it comes to wanting their products not only showcased, but forefront when it comes to most of the other products that are also competing with them. Personally, I find that the cannabis market has an array and an abundance of products, and that has led to a disallowance when it comes to other companies or other entities that are like to enter the market, but are needing to enter the market now in other provinces due to the fact that Ontario has so many, not only LPs, but brands that are now floating and creating a big haze within our cannabis industry. This is Debbie Facey, your Canadian correspondent with Weed Talk News, coming at you with the Canadian Toke of the Week. Peace.
And finally, if you're a cannabis consumer that worries about their lung health, fear not, at least according to one group of researchers. Forbes reported on the new study from researchers at University of Queensland in Australia, which examined whether chronic cannabis smoking was associated with damaging effects on the lungs, specifically in young adults. The researchers followed a cohort of 1,173 young adults, ages 21 to 30, over a 9-year period, and studied their every smoking habit, including whether they used cannabis, tobacco, both, or neither. And according to Forbes, the authors concluded that, quote, cannabis does not appear to be related to lung function, even after years of use. They also surmised that using cannabis with tobacco doesn't seem to add any additional risk to the lungs beyond the harms already associated with smoking tobacco. So there you have it. The next time someone tells you not to smoke so much, just send them this study and tell them it's a whole new world of weed out there. But remember, of course, use it wisely. That's it for Weed Talk News this week. I'm Elena Pinto.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. Now, let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore, so I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now, if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weegits filtration system. What? The Weegits.com, Weegits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. Now, the guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. So here's how it works. You start with that glass bowl, you flame on, and then you inhale nice and smooth so the smoke goes through 3 different filtration and cooling systems. Now, if pre-rolls is your thing, you can use the Weegits filter that a pre-roll fits into perfectly. That's right, or even a chillum. The more filters, the smoother the draw. Best of all is the price. You can get all this, or one or the other, for just a few bucks. It'll cool your smoke and you'll give your lungs a break. Now, add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weegits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
Which at first I thought, oh, I don't know if I'm an activist, but I have, held a bullhorn on the State House steps. I have frequently testified before the Cannabis Control Commission and the state legislature, and I'm not, shy about criticizing where I see, mistakes being made. So yeah, I think that's what differentiates me, just an appreciation for the plant. And then also I'm a cannabis entrepreneur myself. I've started businesses, so I've lived that entrepreneurial journey. I know how hard it is. It is absolutely a marathon, not a sprint. So I think that, I'm in the game, not just on the sidelines.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu, so it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.